Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Foresight Friday. I am so glad you are here. I'm really excited about this show. First off, I want to say thanks for watching Foresight TV. I know that Foresight's not the place for everybody, but if you are in senior living and you are committed to creating great experiences for residents, team members, and family members, this is the place. So I am glad you are here for this particular broadcast. I would love to hear from you about what you're doing to improve the lives of residents, team members, and families. And I'd also love to hear if there's something you think we ought to talk about that we have not been talking about. In addition to Foresight TV, we produce all kinds of really great content. We've got LinkedIn posts, we've got the Foresight podcast, Tech Tuesday. The most impactful thing we do is the Foresight website, where we publish new leadership content every day. It's free. It's easy to subscribe to. There's a QR code up on the screen. There's a link in the chat. All you have to do is click on it or scan it and put your name and information in. And the one other thing I want to say, I'm not sure I'm supposed to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway, is we are launching, it's actually available, you can search for it, but it's not official, a brand new Substack channel that will give practical, actionable leadership stuff. So watch for that in the next week. And let's get started with this. Hey guys, Steve Moran here. Rachel, welcome. We have talked at so many conferences and had so many conversations with both you and Andy. Let me start with this question. What is the simplest, most powerful way for you to tell people what Singfit is about if they've never heard of you, don't know anything about it?
Well, maybe it's something like this, which is everybody has pretty much had an experience of either themselves feeling better when they're actually singing, right? Whether that's singing in the car or whatever, or going to a senior care facility or community and seeing somebody with dementia come alive because of that. What we do is we have a digital platform that enables the therapeutic use of singing to achieve different goals for different populations of people. So that's what we do. We distribute music as medicine to open up access to it to millions of people who didn't have access before.
So I really like this, and I want to really dig into it. I was at a conference, I live in Sacramento, and I was at a conference in LA 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I just listened to a lot of audiobooks. And so I left I drove down, did the calculation, deciding driving made more sense. Left about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, started heading north to Sacramento, had an audiobook, didn't realize I only had a little tiny bit left. And so 15 minutes into it, the book was gone. And it was like, I just couldn't stand the silence, right? And yes. I didn't want to stop in the heavy LA traffic to find a new book. So I popped on my Sirius XM radio to the 70s station and listened to that for the next hour. And it just made me feel so happy. And, back to younger times. And I don't know, the piece was there. So is it that kind of thing that you're talking about?
So there's some of that in there, right? Because one of the things you're talking about, and Steve, I don't want to assume anything about how old you are, but I would assume from that story that in the 1970s, you were somewhere between the ages of like 12 and 28, right? Because those are what in music therapy terms are called the sticky years or the reminiscence bump. So the music that we listen to between those ages is the one that's the most neurologically imprinted on us, right? And so it has the most, for music listening, it can have some of the most physiological kind of biochemical impact on us. But if I were in that car with you and I was like, are you grumpy or whatever it is, are you having a little bit of road rage? Then what I would say is, the difference between what we do, one of the differences between listening to the radio in your car and what we do is we're getting people to actively sing, right? So I describe it a little bit as the difference between going to a dance recital and being in that dance recital. You go to that dance recital, you have to love dance for it to have a neurochemical effect on you. I go to a dance recital, I'm bored. But if I'm in that dance recital, I'm getting the neurological workout. I'm getting the respiratory workout. All of the good things are happening to me, even if I don't particularly like the music or the choreography.
Okay, so when I was driving along, once in a while I'd get a song that I really liked and I'd sing along with that, and that makes it a lot better than when I was just listening.
Exactly. It's way more benefits, and I'm happy to go into them if you like, but there's way more benefits.
Yeah, so my next question is this. So music is therapy. I'd actually like to have you talk to me a little bit about what happens in the brain and why this is, why it's so powerful.
Sure. So there's essentially a waterfall of benefits that happens when you're actively singing, right? So when you sing, you're getting a full brain bihemispheric workout. And what that can do not only is kind of create these, sort of re-energize the brain, it can actually also create new pathways within your neural net. The most famous case of this was with the Congresswoman Gabriella Giffords. So she received left hemisphere brain trauma, which typically results in the inability to speak because most speech takes place in the left hemisphere. But even though you can't speak, you can still sing because singing takes place in multiple parts of the brain. And yes. And so this is, a lot of times when we're out talking, people be like, oh, for stuttering or oh, for this, right? That singing, if you watch the King's Speech, they can help it by singing, right, your way into the words. And so what happens is in these cases, mostly, there's only 10,000 music therapists in the US. This is part of the problem, part of the challenge that we're helping to solve is as opposed to like 120,000 occupational therapists. But if you're Gabriella Giffords and you're getting best in class care, what's going to happen is you're going to have a music therapist on your rehab team. And just like our lyric coaching works within our digital platform and apps, is the music therapist plays the song, tells the people the words of the song right before they need to sing them. And then once you're singing, neuroplasticity takes over and actually rewires where speech takes place in the brain. So Gabriella Giffords herself credits this process. Now, she didn't use it with our tech, but this is the music therapy process that we've digitized. So she credits that process with the restoration of her voice and her ability to speak. And that's just one thing that singing does. But I'm going to pause and ask if you want me to go on with the rest of the benefits.
Yes, I'm gonna want to come back to this, but I realized that as you were talking, I think I actually need to back up just a little bit. And I'd like to have you describe how a senior living community typically, just because this creates framework for everything else, how does a senior living community typically engage with you or with Singfit?
Sure. So we actually have three different solutions. I'm going to tell you about the first one, and that's the one that's in around 800 senior living communities and skilled nursing facilities as we speak, all in about 46 states in the US. And essentially, our platform starts with our technology. And what the technology does is it first uses that prompting system that I was talking about, where our app has three different tracks. One track is for the music, one track is for the lead singer, and the other track is for what we call the lyric coach. And it is that lyric coach that is speaking the words of the song right before they need to sing them, right? And what this does is this allows somebody with dementia, maybe somebody on the autism spectrum, somebody with traumatic brain injury, to have a fully immersive singing experience. Whereas if they'd had to read the words of the song, they would be reminded of their deficit, right? And they would not engage fully in what's going on. And so that's the sort of the enabler, like of what we're doing. And then, Steve, as you said, we've been running into each other at conferences for years now,
Yep.
right? Think it's a 10-year-old company at this point. And so when we started out 10 years ago, the digital health industry was still kind of pretty nascent. And so our first solution, where music as medicine and all of that is the most accepted, especially at the time, was being used with dementia. Right. So we said, okay, if nobody else has been able to crack this nut, we know that we can crack it. We know that we can make a difference for people with dementia and their families with singing, with this protocol. So the first solution that we created is a group process for senior living. And essentially every quarter for the past 10 years, we have written and printed these 12 playlists. And these playlists essentially act as a guide for any kind of activities, person, right? An aide. It can be somebody of any age. They don't need to have any musical experience. They don't need to know anything about the music that they're even playing. People who are 21 can do it, because what we do is first we create a theme for a playlist. So this might be a musical trip across the United Kingdom. And the first place you go is Liverpool. So there's language. Hey, today we're going to go on this journey, musical journey to England. And we're first going to stop in Liverpool, and we're going to sing some Beatles, and we're going to do Beatles trivia, and we're going to talk about who was your favorite Beatle, and all of these kinds of things, but all written and created by music therapists, right? With music therapist best practices engaged. So what we do is we first have an online training for the facilitator. It's about an hour, and they get to know how to use the tech and also how to relate to somebody musically, right? And especially somebody with dementia. Never force somebody to sing. All of these kinds of things are built in to the program. And then after that training, they're able to get up, they get their 12 playlists every quarter, they have their app, so they don't need to be a musician, right? And they can just read the trivia and all of this sort of stuff. There's 8 songs in a playlist, and it's done on a memory care units, it's done on assisted, and it's done on independent. And we make playlists of varying complexities. We call it complexity, right? So that we don't have to say easy, whatever, and various complexity. And they go through 8 songs, and they're able to sing and engage. And really, and it can be a multi-generational thing. And we have a lot of times people use it when families come in, because it gives people something to do together that's joyful. So that was kind of our first product, and the one that's been out in the market the longest. We now have a one-to-one solution that we do, both for professionals to be like speech therapists are using it with older adults of all types, and then also a caregiver version for family, friends, and others to use it one-on-one, again, with a loved one who may have dementia, or really just an older adult who needs some cheering up too.
So let me make sure I understand this. So if I were a life enrichment director and I had this, I would put it up on sort of a big screen like you have behind you with speakers, or I would do it on my cell phone, or how would that work?
So you get a box, actually, right? So you sign up for Singfit, you take your training, and you actually get a box. And this box comes chock full of stuff. So it comes with the playlists. It's got some Singfit shakers, some scarves, and speakers in it. And then the community will have an iPad or an Android device that our app goes on. And that's all you need. Because there's no screen involved, because we don't want people looking at things. We want people looking at each other. We want people interacting with each other, right? So that's some of the best stuff you get when you do this sort of thing. And so so the facilitator, and they do receive a certification after they complete their training. So the facilitator at that community would assess who's in front of me right now, right? Are they working with a memory care group? Are they working with independent living? Are they in the, is it a country music loving group? Is it a disco loving group, right? And they would pick a playlist, one of these physical playlists that they decide matches their group because they know them best. And then they just pick it up, turn on the iPad and go. And one of the things, and we got really, really good input, both from communities and from some experts in the, people who'd worked in senior living for 30 years when we started, about, make this turnkey, make this easy for people. Activities folks at senior living communities are incredibly busy and incredibly overworked. So how can you make their life easier? And that's really one of our big goals in all of this, is to make their jobs better and more enjoyable.
Okay, so I'm gonna throw at you what's sort of a version of what's been sort of my almost go-to question for every interview I do, and that's that, and I'm going to frame it, is that I don't think we spend enough time telling stories about how we're actually improving the lives of people who live in senior living, work in senior living. So my question to you is that, can you tell me about a success story? You've talked about one story that we all know about, but just I'm more interested in the story about an individual whose life has been changed because of what you did, or what you did.
Well, Steve, I mean, it's really one of the best parts of what we do. So where do I start is kind of thing, because there's all different kinds of things. So one story that we get a lot frequently is, and I, again, don't want to genderize, but the older guy who's kind of grumpy and won't engage in anything, right? And the staff is desperate to get those folks get them engaged. And what we do is we make very sure that we're always telling people not to force anyone to do something, right? So if somebody doesn't want to come to a Singfit session, the idea is, don't tell them to say that they're going to come and sing. Just say, hey, do you want to come and listen to some music? Right? Or they'll be passing by the room and they'll hear music or song that they want. And then all of a sudden, the guy who doesn't go to anything, who will never participate, is sitting in there answering the trivia. Maybe the trivia is the only thing that they do at first, but then, more and more and more, they'll get engaged. Sometimes those people have not spoken in what could amount to years. They start singing and then we start engaging in conversation again. So just like number one for us, especially when you're working with dementia, is just about is like engagement is the most important thing, right? So we're very specific about using the most popular songs and all of this kind of stuff, especially for the playlists that involve memory care. But there's so many knock-on effects that you hear about it. And one of my favorite stories is when we did one playlist about like state pies, right? So we would like go to different states and do their pies and sing state songs or something like that. And there'd been a guy who wasn't eating, right? And so there was a question in one of the playlists about like, what's your favorite pie or whatever it was, and his was peach. And so they found, so then the staff knew the guy likes peaches, and so they started getting him peaches at meals, and then he started eating again, and all these kinds of things that happen. So I could go on and on about those. So again, I'll stop so I don't, but there's so many different kinds of benefits.
So you and Andy had this idea and you started working on it. Of course, one of the things that you did was brilliant, is you'd go to conferences like Mary Furlong's, I think, which was the first time I met you. And I remember Andy getting up, and pretty soon he had the whole group singing. And that was very, very powerful, because there were just smiles and on their face. But when did you actually realize that you actually had a business that was working and that this was making a difference?
And I wish, and it's terrible that I don't remember this now, but we had sold a few communities, like a couple one-offs. Oh, it was with an A, Steve, and you'll remember it. They were in the Pacific Northwest. Right? They are in the Pacific Northwest. But this is about 10 years ago, we were training 30 communities at once. And at that time, when we trained 30 communities at once, and you mentioned Andy, and for those folks who might not know Andy, although he's very charismatic and visible at these conferences, as you say, but for people who don't know, he is my co-founder. He's a music therapist. My background is tech and really scaling brick and mortar things into digital solutions. So he's a music therapist, and then, as some people will know, my brother. And so what we did was, was get together and we were able to sort of take his music therapy knowledge, combine it with my scaling knowledge, and do that. And I think up until then, Andy still very much was a clinical music therapist working with kids on the autism spectrum, working with older adults. And when we started doing the company, I think he really missed the clinical stuff. But when we were rolling out those 30 buildings at one time, that's when he really, I think really, and he says this, understood the power of what we were doing, that he could now be in 30 places at once, right? Affecting hundreds and hundreds of people in a way that he wouldn't have been able to do as a single practitioner. And that sale combined with that realization, I think is what made us know that we were on the right track.
Ah, man, I love that story so much. So, in the vein of doing harder questions, as you went through this process, what's a mistake you made that you learned from that if you were going to go back and do, you do differently?
Well, when you talk about mistakes, right? So it's like, what did you do wrong? So I think that there's a chance that if I were to know everything I knew today, back then, there's a good chance we wouldn't have gone into dementia, because, and I don't know that I would have done it differently, but what I found out later, of course, and as I got more and more into how things are paid for, going into something that isn't very reimbursable is maybe not the best, idea. But at the end of the day, I'll tell you one more mistake we made, but we fixed this one pretty quick, right? Is when we first launched the app, of course, we're sitting here going, we're so brilliant. We came up with this thing. Everybody's going to want it. I got like an answering service for the phone. I thought as soon as we launched this thing on the App Store, the calls are just going to come ringing in, right? And that did not happen. And so we had the app, but we hadn't decided on what our use case is, because the thing about singing as a therapeutic tool is it's really, I call it a womb to hospice solution. And we are working with hospice providers now, because singing can be used for a variety of things throughout the entirety of our lives. And so when we first started, we sort of had this idea of, okay, creating the app gave us the ability to, because I knew from my past in tech that I didn't want to go B2C right away. So we were going out and pitching different healthcare organizations. Hey, look what we can do. Look what we can do. And then we would just write white paper after white paper for these folks and get paid nothing for it. And so we did that for about, I don't know, 6 to 8 months after the app was launched. And then we were like, nope,
Yeah.
we're just going to find a use case where somebody can pay, not to be crude about it, but where somebody's going to pay us some money for this thing. And we can show, that we're a viable business. And that's when we decided the greatest need was, and therefore for us, the greatest opportunity was in dementia. And so that's when we said, we're going to create a solution just for that market and showcase what we can do.
Cool. So I know that you have some expertise in terms of scaling companies and growing companies. And I'm really curious, and I came back from the NIC conference last week, and I will tell you, it's really chaotic to talk to people. There are some people who are saying, oh man, with the demographics, we don't have enough senior living communities, we can't build enough, and all this stuff. And then somebody else will come along and say, I don't know, it costs too much and people don't like it, and we've got all these barriers. So put your sort of forecasting. I'm going to do this a little differently as I think about it. If you were a senior living operator and you were looking out to the future, how would you create something massive and wonderful that people would love to come to? Is that you may hate that question, and if you hate that question, I'll shift. But I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
No, not at all. I mean, you're not talking just about for Singfit, but for industry, like
the industry as a whole, for the aging. I don't like the word aging, but for older people to be able to give them better lives.
Yeah, I would make it all intergenerational, right? I would go back to the way that we lived really, and human beings evolved, which is we lived in these multi-generational communities so that young parents would have somebody to watch their kids with, so they didn't have to be 24/7 locked in a house with them. And older people get purpose from being with the children, and everybody's interacting. And so I'm not saying that everybody has to live in exactly the same house, but and actually at one of Mary Furlong's events, I think we went somewhere and we had kind of like a IDEO session around this. And
Yeah.
this is really what most people were saying. This is not a completely original or at all original idea of mine, but the idea that, purpose, this is what I learned in working in long-term care for the past 10 years, is I always thought, having worked in startups for the past 25, that I retire, man, just give me the hammock, give me the beach, and I'm done, right? Because I'm exhausted. But what I learned, through these years, is that it's the sense of purpose that keeps people alive and moving and participating in life. And I think sometimes, in its worst case, or even sometimes not even its worst case, sometimes senior living and can seem kind of like a crappy cruise, right? That you're just kind of stuck on with the same people, you're doing the same activities, you're doing, you don't, and who really wants that for a huge amount of time?
Yeah, I love that term, a crappy cruise, because I'm afraid that's too often the case. People are probably tired of me talking about it, but my stepfather was in senior living for a bit, and I'd go in and they'd be doing poker bingo or batting balloons around with
The balloons are the
full moon.
ones that killed me. That killed me.
And I'd look at that and I think, oh my God, I hope I die before that becomes my life. And I just think that what you're doing is the kind of thing that makes it better than that. So where do you think Singfit's going to be in 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, there's so many answers to that, but I would say, we have this new, as I was talking about, that we won the USC Keck School of Medicine Body Computing Prize about 7 years ago, and we won it for the vision of what we were doing in 10 years, and that's happening. That product has now come out, and that's our Singfit Studio solution. And what that is, I describe it as like a medical musical tricorder, if people are into Star Trek, and if they're not, then it's a medical musical Swiss Army knife. Because what our studio solutions can do is very quickly adapt to the goals, culture, musical tastes of individuals and small groups. So, right now, and what that means is that it will become more ubiquitous and be able to be used by more people. So you can go in, and right now our music catalog is a lot like, the mid 1970s, 80s and back, right? So that's what we've been focused on. But basically, and you can now go in and say, this is the outcome that I want. This is the condition I have. These are my sticky years, although you don't know you're saying that. And it will create on the fly a playlist to get you to that result that you want, whether it's decreased agitation for somebody with dementia, whether it's increased energy for somebody with diabetes, to get them off the couch and out the door and walking. So that's kind of where we're going technologically. And I think also where we're going, if you're talking 5-10 years, is that, Andy and I have been living in this world of music as medicine for a very, very long time. And I am seeing just the explosion of interest that has come out in the last 4 to 5 years is really incredible. And so my forecast would be, especially with some other things in the market, that music as medicine in general will be much more fully integrated into the healthcare system 5 to 10 years from now than it is right now.
So a couple of thoughts. We're almost out of time, but you really got my head spinning on this. So as I think I've heard you describe this as music as therapy, and sort of by nature therapy is this idea is that it's something you give to people who have already had loss or decline, right?
Mhm.
But and you sort of dance around my age. I'm 70. The thing in
Mhm.
the back is I was born in 1955, and that was something for my birthday a few weeks ago. And so
Mhm.
I've talked about it pretty openly. But what I guess I'm thinking is that when I look at myself, and I'm probably worse at this than a lot of people, but other people my age, we're frankly having a really hard time with this getting old thing because in our heads, my body may be 70, but I'm trying to deny that. And I'm certainly denying that I've got a 70-year-old brain. And so I'm wondering, how does this play in more of in a preventative
Mhm.
fashion more than fixing something that's gone wrong?
Sure. So I'm gonna quote Andy here or channel Andy here, which is what he would say about that is when we're putting together our algorithms and when we're doing things, it's always about what's the why, right? Like why are you doing what you're doing? So in your case, if what your concern is brain health, right? Then simply the act, and this is something we like to emphasize too. This is not about if you driving in your car once in a while and singing, yep, it'll lift your mood in that moment. But if you really want to get consistent results, if you want to be, then you have to do it like a yoga practice, like an exercise practice. So if you're gonna sing that 20 minutes a week or 20 minutes a day 3 times a week in the same way that you would exercise 20 minutes 3 days a week, and that in and of itself, that neuroplastic, you're going to be mixing up that neuroplasticity and that brain chemistry, and you're going to be because the other thing about what's challenging our brains as we get older too is that stress affects it. And one of the things that I didn't get to when we were talking about the benefits is when you sing, and the reason people like to sing, serotonin, oxytocin, endorphins, dopamine, all this stuff is happening when we sing. And so you're also reducing your stress and the effect that has on your brain. And we've done some small pilot studies and we're getting ready to do a larger one, some of our communities about at one of the adult day centers where we are, they reduced the use of PRN, anti-anxiety and antipsychotics by 40% in like the 5 people that they were doing testing this on. And all of those kinds of medications, if one is taking them, can also affect the brain. So if we can reduce the medication use, right, we're going to reduce the impact that those kinds of drugs have on our brains as well. And then, next time you see Andy at a conference, you can ask him about there's other things about, and this is key to what we do, is the algorithm that gets delivered depending on the goal is going to deliver you up different songs. So that, like I said, for dementia, engagement is the most important thing. You want the most popular songs, you want to get it as tailored to them because you want success, right? Dementia people are going around and just feel like they're failing all day long. We want them to feel successful all the time, and everything is created for that. But for you, right, if you're about like, I want to get my brain better and you understand what's going on, it's a little bit like regular exercise. It might hurt a little bit, right? Like it might be a little bit like your heart. And so, that algorithm might bring other things into play that would make it a little bit more difficult actually for you to complete that, but you would understand what's going on. So there's plenty of things to do, and then there's other musical interventions, because music therapists and therapeutic music uses a lot of different techniques. The singing is, we think, a great one because everyone
The
can
best.
do it.
Right.
There's other things
Yeah.
to do. Mhm.
Great. So we're over time, but I want to give you 45 seconds to sort of
Mhm.
just give us a pitch for how we get in touch, how we would work
Mhm.
with you, and that kind of thing.
Sure. So get in touch. The easiest thing is just, we have an email address that's SING at singfit.com, and you can write it to that, and it will get, if you're interested, if you're somebody from, who runs senior living community, and you want to get in touch with our with our outreach team, we can put you in touch with there. If you just have general questions, it'll be sent along to whomever. Of course, we also have a website and Instagram and all of those things, and it's singfit.com or We Are Singfit, depending on what platform you're on. If people do want to download the app itself, either a healthcare professional, and this is the one-to-one app, the group sessions, you got to come to us, but you need to go to our website to download it. I would like to emphasize that. Please go to the website, download it, and then you can get your credentials to sign in.
Cool. Rachel, thank you very much. This has been
Thanks,
really
Steve.
cool. I appreciate it. I love your passion for making a difference in the world, for making a difference in older people. And to all of you watching, thank you very much. Also, thanks to Leanne Hubbard, who is producing in the background, pinch hitting for Jada, who's out for a couple of weeks. And I hope you all have a great weekend. And I will see you next week with 2 more great shows. Rachel, hold on for just a minute after we're done.
Yes, and thank you, Steve.